name is Daniel Bart. I've been associated with the MSC conferences since about our event in 2008. So I've been to a few of these myself, but this is the first time I've actually been on stage to present anything, and it is my pleasure to be on stage to present Lieutenant Commander Ryan Bell, who is the former executive officer of HMCS Harry DeWolf, the Royal Canadian Navy's first Arctic and offshore patrol ship, or AOPS. Ryan is here to tell us of his time serving in Harry DeWolf, which included the ship's first deployment beginning in August 2021. Not to steal any of his thunder or any of the details of his presentation, but this deployment saw the ship conduct the first transit of the Northwest Passage, an RCN vessel completed since the 1950s. This continued into a circumnavigation of North America, a total voyage of over 12,000 nautical miles that saw the ship operate in -20°C temperatures in the Arctic and nearly 40°C temperatures near the equator. I think this speaks to the flexibility of the platform and the uniqueness of our own maritime environment here. And I can't think of many other nations that have faced similar challenges in operating within their own territory like we have here. So please join me in welcoming Ryan, and please continue with it.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I don't have a podium, and so I'm holding a mic and doing this at the same time. And I'm known to be someone who likes to pace and move around, so I'll try to stay still as much as possible. But thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about the Harry DeWolf-Class. I will start off with a disclaimer that I am by far not an unbiased presenter. Having had the opportunity to deploy twice on Harry DeWolf, I think they're fantastic ships, and I'm exceptionally excited for what they can bring to the Navy. And I hope by the end of this presentation that some of that excitement is evident to you as well. And given the nature of some of the talks we've had, which have been fantastic so far, I would say that while this is maritime security challenges, my talk is more a little upbeat. So maritime security opportunities with a new class of ship. There is no downside here today. The Harry DeWolf class is excellent. So there's your spoiler alert. Okay, so what I want to do is provide an overview of the class for those who are unfamiliar with the Harry DeWolf class, and kind of a brief introduction to some of the capabilities that the class holds. And then I'm going to go through in brief detail the North American circumnavigation deployment that we did last year, and use that to showcase the how we utilize these capabilities, and then talk a bit about where these capabilities can be utilized outside of the Canadian Arctic as we move forward with the class. So this is my favorite picture of the Harry DeWolf class. A lot of people like the Northern Lights one. That's not my favorite because I wasn't there for that one. This is my favorite, and the reason, not just because I was on board, is it looks like an artist's conception. It looks like something that came out 10 years ago when we were still building the ships. And to me, that's the Arctic. The Arctic is so beautiful that when you see a picture like this, you think it's fake. And that's the kind of the joy of being in the Harry DeWolf class, is getting to deploy to the Arctic and seeing how beautiful it is up there. So I'm just going to give an overview of the class. They're 104 meters in length and 19 meters wide. So they're big ships. They have a draft of 5.7 meters, but they're self-ballasting ships. And the reason for that is at the numbers and just forward to the bow is the ice belt. And when you go to enter into an ice field, what you do is you make an assessment of the status and the thickness of the ice field, and then you ballast the ship in order to best position that ice belt for the ice breaking operations you're going to do. And so that means that it's got a variable draft. And then when we talk about displacement, which is on average 6,600 tons, but can go up to 7,100 tons with that ballasting if we need to go into heavy load. It's got a crew size of 65 people. And, from this picture, you can't really tell. But there is 1.3 times the internal space in a Harry DeWolf class that there is in a Halifax class. And so for 65 people in a ship of that size, there's some challenges there. But the great thing is that we're using unique ways of using our people. And we've got technology and automation that allow us to be very efficient with those resources and to accomplish with a crew of 65 what would normally take many more people in previous classes or ships. You can see here it says with accommodations for 87, the Harry DeWolf class is unique in that it has 22 extra bunks, which are above and beyond the crew of the ship. And that allows us to not only take trainees, but allows us to take mission specialists and embark forces and to bring people on board that can augment our missions, whether they be in the Arctic or anywhere else. And so those extra 22 bunks really provide us with a level of flexibility that comes in handy for a lot of the missions that this class is going to be asked to do. Flexibility is kind of the word you'll hear me say again and again and again, because these truly are very flexible platforms that can respond to a variety of situations. Its max speed is 17 knots, and its a range of 6,800 nautical miles. And so when we talk about range, these are very fuel efficient ships. They carry a lot of fuel and they can go a long distance. And that obviously is very useful in the Arctic, where refueling facilities are few and far between and jetty facilities are almost non-existent. But when we start talking about using these ships outside of the Canadian Arctic, that range also provides us with the ability to get to where we're going and do what we need to do without constantly relying on tanker support or host nation fueling. And that comes in handy when you're looking for flexible options. So here is just some of the capabilities that the class holds, and I'll get to others as we move about the description of the deployment. The ship has a flight deck and a hangar, which is fitted to work with and host a CH-148 Cyclone helicopter. The Harry DeWolf completed shipboard helicopter operating limits trials in June of 2021. And the final installations and work needed to do the permanent set for organic helicopter operations is underway at present. But despite this, we hosted and worked with and refueled a variety of Coast Guard helicopters during our 2021 deployment. And it's a fantastic sized flight deck that really opens up a wide variety of things. For those that are interested, it's 68 laps of the flight deck for a 5K run. It's really difficult if you lose track of that. So the next thing is the multi-purpose operations space. So you're used to hearing about warships with operations rooms. We don't have an operations room. We call it an MPOS, a multi-purpose operations space. And that's because it is not absolutely necessary for the day-to-day operations of the ship. The Sea Guard, the radar operator, is on the bridge. And the MPOS on a day-to-day basis is used for planning, briefing, and general operations department work. And where this space really comes in handy is the fact that it's got two combat management system terminals. It's got a variety of thin client computers that can be set up to with a variety of Canadian or international networks. And it's got a 14-person board table and presentation screens. And what this allows us to do is when we take on, let's say, a fleet staff, as Margaret Brooke did this summer, or in the case of a humanitarian assistance disaster relief operation, taking on board other governmental departments or NGOs, they can use this space and it can be a floating command center. And so it really allows us to be able to maximize those embarked forces by having the spaces that actually work for them, as opposed to trying to work them into spaces that are already used by other aspects of the ship's operations. And as we mentioned, embarked forces spaces, so we've got the 20-person embarked forces mess, but we also have a variety of spaces on board that are dedicated to mission specialists and embarked forces. And so those are an embarked forces armory. So a group of people, such as a U.S. Coast Guard law enforcement detachment, would have their weapons separate from the ship's company's weapons, their ammunition separate. There is a embarked forces stores, which during our Op Carib portion of the deployment, we used to store cocaine that we interdicted. And this allows for those extra personnel that are mission specialists to be able to use those spaces as they see fit with the security they need. We have a fantastic medical facility, so medical office, a two-bed ward, and then a procedure room that is roughly the size of a Halifax-class wardroom. It's just a fantastic facility. During the northern part of our circumnavigation deployment, we had a medical officer and a physician's assistant on board, which meant that we also had a biofire lab assessment capability and medical imaging on board, which came in handy during a medical issue that arose. And we were able to use the medical officer and the medical imaging to diagnose that in the high Arctic, something that is normally not capable. So it really allows us to operate away from those shore-based supports. And then probably my favorite part of the ship, although that sounds weird to say that the quarterdeck cargo space is your favorite part of the ship. But the quarterdeck allows us to carry up to 6 full-size ISO containers. And the flexibility offered by those containers is near limitless. So during the northern part of the trip, we had the TRAPS equipment, which is the towed reelable active passive sonar. It's a low frequency active towed array. During the southern part of our deployment, we carried humanitarian assistance disaster relief supplies. And there are a variety of plans in place for further modular payloads. And that really adds to what this class can bring for Canada, both inside Canadian waters and then internationally as well. So here's a great port quarter shot at the waterline of Harry DeWolf. And you can see here the quarterdeck just underneath the flight deck netting. The quarterdeck actually continues a little bit underneath there as well. And then right on the stern there is the 20-ton crane. And the 20-ton crane is a fantastic piece of kit in the fact that it allows us to load and unload organically. And so we can move containers. You can put 6 containers on the quarterdeck, but you can also put, if you didn't need the flight deck, you can put another 6 containers on the flight deck as well. And so that kind of cargo carrying capacity and the ability to load and unload yourself, when you think of the Arctic where there isn't any jetties or jetty facilities, or a humanitarian assistance disaster relief scenario where those facilities might be damaged or the personnel unable to utilize them, the Harry DeWolf class has the ability to do that itself, and that really provides a lot of capability. So just an overview of where we are with the introduction of this class. Harry DeWolf was accepted by the Navy in the summer of 2020 and commissioned in June of 2021. Margaret Brooke was accepted in the summer of 2021 and was commissioned several weeks ago in Halifax. Max Bernays was accepted this summer and is in post-acceptance trials, and William Hall, Frederick Rollet, and Robert Hampton Gray are in various stages of construction and awaiting being accepted by the RCN. And it's worth noting that Max Bernays, as we are on the West Coast, is the first West Coast-based Harry DeWolf class, and we're expecting her to join the Pacific Fleet next summer. So this is the overview of where we went in our circumnavigation deployment. And so you can see that we went through the Northwest Passage and then proceeded down to Esquimalt, and then did our southern leg where we did counter-narcotic operations in the Eastern Pacific, transited the Panama Canal, did some patrols in the Caribbean Sea, and then proceeded back up. And this really shows the breadth of where we operated and shows how capable these ships are from environmental conditions. So people will say, well, it's an Arctic offshore patrol ship. It's meant for the Arctic. You can't take it anywhere else. And this deployment allowed us to demonstrate that that is absolutely not true. These are ships that within the space of a little over a month went from breaking ice in the high Arctic to less than 50 nautical miles north of the equator, and with very little difficulty. So they're fantastically robust ships in regards to an environmental range that they can operate in. So this is the route we took in the Northwest Passage. And so we left Halifax at the beginning of August with Sea Training Pacific embarked, and we did the inaugural intermediate multi-ship readiness training serial, which culminated in Harry DeWolf being granted normal readiness status for the first time for the class. We disembarked Sea Training in Iqaluit, which is that first star there. And we picked up a group of RCMP officers, and their job over the next week they were with us was to assess how the Harry DeWolf class could be utilized by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for their missions both in the Arctic and in domestic waters in southern Canada as well. We went over, did a brief stop for fuel in Nuuk, Greenland, and then we proceeded up to the northern part of Baffin Island and into the Northwest Passage proper. And so this phase here in the eastern part of the Arctic was all based on doing community visits. And so while the rest of the warships in the Royal Canadian Navy are named after cities in Canada, Harry DeWolf-Class is obviously named after people. And so while the HMCS Toronto was affiliated with Toronto the city, we are affiliated with one of the 6 Inuit regions of Canada's Arctic, being the first and arguably the best of the Harry DeWolf class. Again, not an unbiased presenter. Harry DeWolf got the largest of those regions, the Kikitani region. And so that is basically the mainstay of Baffin Island, and then the eastern archipelagic islands on just off Baffin Bay there. And there's 11 key communities in the Kikitani region, and we were able to visit 3 of them during this transit, and those being Pond Inlet, Grise Fjord, and Arctic Bay. So we went into these communities and we wanted to establish that relationship, and not just because we're affiliated with them, but because this is the area where we're going to be operating as a ship for the next 40 or so years. And these are people who live up there, who operate up there, and they've got the lived experience and the knowledge that we need to be successful in our mission. And so we wanted to partner with them. And so the first thing that we had to do was make ourselves known to them and to get them to know us and vice versa. So we went ashore and we met with the elders and the Hamlet administration. And then we used our landing craft to bring barbecues and food ashore, and we held a community barbecue in the center of the hamlet. And these were fantastically well-received events. I think like the world over, everyone loves free food. And this allowed us to really get the whole community together, have a little bit of a festive atmosphere, and talk to them and get to know them. And then let them know what our job was and what we were going to do and what the future plans were. And then from there, we brought them out to the ship. We showed them around. And while it was, it's common for, HMCS Toronto to tell people in Toronto that Toronto was their ship, we were telling the people of the Kikitani region that Harry DeWolf was theirs. And when they see Harry DeWolf, that's their ship. And so they were well received with the ship. And during these discussions, we were able to find out ways that we could provide an immediate benefit to these communities. And so, and I think my favorite example of that is when we were in Grise Fjord. And one of the elders told us that their community freezer, where they store their community catch for the winter, had broken. And so we offered, we'll see what we can do with our engineers. And the Harry DeWolf class has a variety of workshops and tools that can be used for these things. And so we sent a team ashore, and I went with them. And just as I was about to get onto the landing craft, one of our navcoms came to me and said, "Hey, sir, can I join you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm always happy to have some help," assuming that I would have someone to talk to while the engineers did the maintenance work. I later found out that in his civilian life, he was a refrigeration technician. So I had no one to talk to, but I mean, this is why I love Canadian sailors, because they come to us with a variety of random skill sets and are so happy to be able to use them. And so, the engineers were already there and they were poking around and doing engineering things. And this naval communicator just walked in, took one look at it and said, "Oh, I know what's wrong. That's put in backwards and that's uninstalled and we need to fix that." And, it's always a fun time when you see engineers look sheepish when a navcom shows them up. And so he was able to disassemble it, fix it, reassemble it, and get that community freezer back in operation. And we did the similar things in every community we visited. And it was fantastic for our ship's company to be able to give back to these communities, and for us to kind of demonstrate what we can do with these ships, not just on a grand kind of strategic level, but on a local level where the personnel skill sets can really come into handy. So this is a video of our landing craft. And so we named our landing craft after HMCS Labrador's boat, so it's called Amarak. And we would use this to get ashore in every community because there is no jetty facilities in the Arctic. And you can see here that the vehicle we're unloading is the ship's UTV. We have a vehicle bay just off the quarterdeck that can carry 2 of these UTVs or ATVs or even a full-size pickup truck or skidoos. And we can put them using the 20-ton crane into the landing craft, put them ashore, and then move personnel and equipment around communities. And when we talk about how this deployment helped us really build those standard operating procedures for employment of this class beyond the Arctic, the landing craft is really one of those key components. Is we learned how to employ it the best way. Our bosuns got really good at being able to judge how to get it into the beach. And this is an incredibly and fantastic piece of kit. It can carry up to 40 people. It can carry a large amount of equipment and can carry a full-size pickup truck. And it's got a cab which is heated and with air conditioning. It's over the horizon capable, full navigation and communication suite. And so it allows us, to do multiple things at once, even when we're employing the landing craft away from the visual sight of the ship. And our team got very good at utilizing that and being able to do putting things ashore and extractions of personnel and equipment from beaches in a variety of conditions. So once we finished our work in the Kikatani region, we then proceeded into the Central Arctic. And this is the part that kind of I was looking the most forward to, because we knew that once we got into the Central Arctic, this is where we would start doing some really good ice-breaking operations. And we were not disappointed. During this transit here, we did about 4.5 days of straight ice breaking in meter ice. And it was meter thick first year ice. It's late in the navigable season. We're talking late August at this point. So a little bit of a state of decay. You can see here, back to my earlier comment about everything in the Arctic looks beautiful. That's a great shot of us doing ice breaking operations at night. You can see that the pools of water on the ice. That's a sign that we're starting into the late stages of decay of the first year ice. And so this is first year ice, about 1 meter in thickness with multi-year inclusions. So that's high Arctic ice that has been flushed down over the course of the summer and then refrozen up. And this allowed us ample opportunity to start building that base of bridge teams and sailors who knew how to operate in ice. And my background is in navigation, and I spent the last 20 years trying not to hit something. And then we go into our first ice flow, and the captain, Commander Corey Gleason, turns to me and goes, "Okay, X, go hit that." It's a little bit of an awkward moment when you realize you're about to hit something on purpose. But after you get over that initial shock, it's a lot of fun. But it's for anyone who hasn't, experienced icebreaking operations, it's loud, it's jarring, but you get used to it. And the ship and the crew handled it fantastically. And by the end, we had some fantastically skilled people who knew how to do icebreaking operations. So here's a great video of us in the northern part of Lancaster Sound doing icebreaking operations. And this is using the ship's embarked drone. Our ship's information warfare officer, Lieutenant Steve Gallant, was our drone operator for the deployment and did just a fantastic job of capturing this kind of thing, and also figuring out how to use a drone for ice spotting operations too. And so he would put it in the air and then use that drone to help us find the best route through an ice field. And you never get tired of standing on the bridge and looking out and seeing ice and kind of feeling that movement around you. So then once we were finished in the Central Arctic and we proceeded into the Western Arctic, into Queedmont Gulf there. And the first stop is Cambridge Bay. And Cambridge Bay was a key place for us because that was our resupply spot. And so one of the things that you've got to get right is your logistics support in the Arctic. And Cambridge Bay has a fantastic airfield and a great beach for using the landing craft. And a CC-130 flight brought in food and repair supplies and some personnel, and we were able to replenish. At the same time, we were supposed to also get a fuel resupply. But unfortunately, the resupply ship for our fuel got stuck in northern Hudson's Bay. And this is really kind of highlights why when you're dealing with Arctic operations, you need backup plans to your backup plans to your backup plans. Because what happened is a shift of the wind and the ice moved, and all of a sudden what was a clear shot for this fuel resupply ship was all of a sudden packed in ice. And they were very much delayed. And we started looking at what our options were. And what we were able to determine is we had enough fuel to continue on. And this shows how well these ships were designed for the Arctic, is they carry a massive amount of fuel. And so when we were running the calculations and made the decision, yeah, we can proceed without this, we don't have to wait around, we realized that we could have left from Halifax and gone through the Northwest Passage to Esquimalt on a single tank of gas. Now, it would have limited our operational flexibility, but it's in the realm of the possible. And that kind of flexibility and that ability to exist for long periods of time without resupply is really where the Harry DeWolf class is going to earn its chops both in the Arctic and around the world. We then went to Kugluktuk, which is the second star there in the circle. Finished up our community visits and had a visit with Joint Task Force North and Commander Canadian Joint Operations Command before proceeding towards Alaska. So once we did a brief stop for fuel in Dutch Harbor, which the crew loved because some of the boats from the Deadliest Catch were parked right near us. So that was a big draw. We came into Prince Rupert and picked up Vice Admiral Topshee and proceeded down to the Inside Passage. And it was one of those. The morning we picked up the Admiral was a great one. It was it was dark, and we were proceeding in, and there's a bunch of islands just outside Prince Rupert, and we're on the bridge, and we're kind of looking. We're like, that looks weird. What's going on over there? We realized as the sun rose, it was trees. We hadn't seen trees in 2 months, and so we were not used to seeing things on the rocks. And so it was just this wonderful kind of moment where we all kind of cheered on the bridge. We're like, trees. And then we proceeded down through the Inside Passage and then made stops in Vancouver and Victoria, and then came alongside Esquimalt, and we did outreach events and receptions, and we're able to showcase the ship, which was great because we love showing off what the ship can do. And then we stopped in Esquimalt, and we did a 3-week rest and maintenance period while we were alongside in Esquimalt, and we were well looked after the whole time. We were able to get most of the crew home for some rest with their families mid-deployment. And then we went back at it, and we went south for the second half of the deployment. And so we embarked to sea training again, and they did another workups program with us to get us ready for the Op Carib portion of the deployment. And then we picked up our U.S. Coast Guard law enforcement detachment in San Diego. And then we went down into the Eastern Pacific off of Central America there, and we did our first patrol. And so, as I said earlier, it's about 5 weeks between when we were breaking ice for 5 days straight and when we were 50 nautical miles north of the equator. And the ship has procedures you follow when you're switching from cold to warm, and you follow them, and it did quite well. And it was quite the change. Usually when you go on a deployment, you know what you can pack, and for this one, you kind of had to pack everything. But we operated off the east coast there the west coast of Central America. And where the Harry DeWolf class really comes in handy in this region is we've got the legs, as I've mentioned before. And so we're able to get farther out from the coast and do those interdictions and go after those contacts. And we were successful. We made multiple interdictions and we had a great time, and it was a successful mission. And we learned how to employ the ship and its capabilities on a constabulary mission. So I haven't had a chance to talk about the multi-role rescue boats yet, and this is a great shot of when our U.S. Coast Guard law enforcement detachment was doing their integration training with us. And the ship carries 2 multi-role rescue boats. They carry 8 people in individually shock-mounted seats. You can take the back 4 seats out and turn it into what we call the pickup truck mode for extra cargo. They've got a full navigation suite, radar, communications, and they're over-the-horizon capable. And what this meant was that when we had a contact, we were able to get close to the contact, stay over the horizon, launch our boats, and then have them go in a you know, a stealth mode and close in from 2 different angles on the contact. And you know, when they're seconds out, the blue flashing lights come on, and it's over. The LED is on board, and these boats, the ability to use 2 at the same time. But also their speed and their over-the-horizon capability were fantastic in this mission. So they're also equipped, you can see the top left corner there, with a pintle-mounted C6 machine gun, so they have the ability to provide self-defense for themselves. And on the top right, you can see that unlike most boats in the RCN, they're recovered in the cradle or at deck level with the crew embarked. So there's no climbing up ladders. It's all, you know, easy. And so this means that when we're moving casualties, when we're embarking or disembarking narcotics that have been seized, and in a variety of weather conditions, these boats are incredibly capable and don't have the concerns you might have in other classes of ship. And on the bottom here, you see one of our successful drug busts. I believe that's about 1,300 kilograms of cocaine that we were able to seize in that bust, and that was you know, a fantastic moment for the ship's company to be able to prove that we were more than just an icebreaker. So once we finished in the Eastern Pacific, we proceeded through the Panama Canal, did some patrols in the Caribbean, and then we did 2 diplomatic engagements, one in Montego Bay, Jamaica, and then one in Norfolk, Virginia, where we supported the Canadian diplomatic missions in both those countries. And the Harry DeWolf class, because of its size and its galley and the hangar, really allows us to put on a good show, to use the ship to support other governmental departments, or you know, to hold diplomatic receptions and to support those kind of engagements. We did smaller engagements with the Canadian Trade Envoy in Balboa, Panama, and the Canadian Defense Attaché in Puerto Chiapas, Mexico as well. And then we returned to Halifax on the 16th of December, having circumnavigated North America. And so during the course of that deployment, we steamed 22,942 nautical miles. We visited 16 communities, seized 2,500 kilograms of cocaine, and we circumnavigated 1 continent. I tried to make the case that we should avoid the Panama Canal and just circumnavigate 2 continents, but it just wasn't in the cards, unfortunately. So now that I've talked about what we did, it's worth noting, you know, as we move forward and we mature with this class and we get more of them, what are we going to use these ships for? And I'm not speaking as someone who is authorized to talk about the official plan, but more as someone who has operated in these ships, and these are kind of some of the ideas that I've seen. And so we've seen that the Op Carib is a constabulary operation. The support we can provide to the RCMP, both in the Arctic and in Canadian waters, for interdictions and day-to-day operations is I think, a real capability. And then international constabulary operations, not just in Op Carib, but in other theaters as well. Maritime defense diplomacy, the presence of a warship in an area and the ability to host and to influence a local population is key. And the Harry DeWolf class showed that it had the ability to do that, and has the capability to do that in other international areas. And so when we're talking about that, a good kind of potential mission set is Op Projection Africa. you could take a Harry DeWolf class over to the Gulf of Guinea and do building partner capacity ship work to help partner nations in the region build up their own maritime self-defense and operational capabilities, while also supporting Canadian diplomatic missions and other governmental departments in the area. The same that we do with the Kingston class, but do it in a larger platform that can operate in a wider area for a longer period of time. And then, I've touched on this a few times, but HADR, Humanitarian Assistance Disaster Relief. I think that these ships are fantastic platforms for a potential future humanitarian assistance disaster relief operation. We carried the HADR Packup with us in containers on the quarterdeck during our UP Carib deployment in 2021. And then we carried similar equipment during our UP Carib deployment in 2022 as well. And the fact that the ship's got multiple boats, a lot of excess freshwater production capabilities, and a landing craft and the ability to host and work with aircraft mean that these are all capabilities that would come in handy when we'd be tasked to help support a nation after some type of natural disaster. And that could also see a Harry DeWolf class be the command ship for that. And not just a military command ship, but the whole of government kind of base of operations for that kind of operation using the multi-purpose operation space. And then non-combatant evacuation operations. Well, we've got bunks for 87. While we were in the Arctic, we picked up almost 30 members of the Canadian Army and brought them from one community to another. And the ability to carry extra people for short periods of time in the hangar and in other spaces. The Harry DeWolf class has nothing but space. We've got lots of it, and it's no problem for us to carry extra people. And then warfare missions with modular payloads. And so I mentioned that we deployed to the Arctic with the towed reelable active passive low frequency active sensor system, which is a low frequency active towed array in a container that was on Harry DeWolf's quarterdeck. And we deployed that and operated with that in the Northwest Passage, doing ASW picture compilation in the Arctic with a Harry DeWolf class right off the bat with this new class of ship. And that kind of capability, to throw a warfare or a sensor capability into a container and then deploy it with the Harry DeWolf class really opens up, warfare capabilities, sensor capabilities, but also, extra freshwater production capabilities in a container, extra medical capabilities in a container. There really is no limit to what you can put in a container and then deploy with the Harry DeWolf class. So, conclusion. The Harry DeWolf class is a versatile and capable platform. It's built in Canada and for Canada, and is already delivering results for Canada right now with both Harry DeWolf's deployments in 2021 and 2022, and then Margaret Brooks' Op-Nanook deployment and her humanitarian assistance disaster relief tasking at the end of that deployment this summer, where she helped respond to the aftermath of the hurricane that hit the east coast of Canada. It's a proven Arctic capabilities through 2 successive annual northern deployments. Margaret Brooke got to the edge of the Canadian archipelago right after the edge and making a new record for Canadian Forces warships this summer, showing that these are capable ships that can operate in the Canadian Arctic with a lot of flexibility. And they possess capabilities that allow for excellence in operations outside of Arctic waters, as we saw in Harry DeWolf's southern part of her deployment in 2021 and our Op Carib deployment in 2022. And there is a lot of room to grow for new international missions, both Op Projection Africa, Op Reassurance, and other taskings that may come up. These ships are able to do it. So, if you want to see more of the Harry DeWolf class, there is actually 2 documentaries already made. So the first one is Into the North. It was made by Royal Canadian Navy Public Affairs. They won an award for it. It's a fantastic 11-minute mini documentary. It's on YouTube. I highly recommend it. I personally don't like the sound of my own voice, so I don't like the documentary because I'm talking on it. But the cinematography is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. And then Arctic Blue, we brought Peter Mansbridge on board. for about a week while we were in the Northwest Passage, and he filmed portions of his documentary that talks about not only the military's use of the Arctic, but climate change, the work of Aboriginals in the Arctic and the Inuit, and the militarization of that space. And both are available online. So with that, I will turn over to questions.
Sorry, are you back on here? Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan, for that. I do have to issue a bit of an apology to you because I said 12,000 nautical miles, but you corrected us 24,000, which speaks, of course, to the versatility of the vessel, which I have to keep reminding myself is best understood as Arctic/offshore patrol ship rather than Arctic-offshore patrol ship. So yes, I mentioned that we adjusted some of the timings this afternoon, and that was to give us more time for questions here. So I will stop talking. And Jocelyn, if you could please find our, here we are.
Doug Bancroft, Canadian Scientific Submersible Facility. I only have one question, so I'm not going to ask you, why the heck didn't you get south of the equator on just one sort of, don't answer the question, I only get one.
All I'll say is we wanted to, we really did.
I almost took Yellowknife down there as a plank owner. It's so tempting. Okay, the question is, what do you do with these ships now in terms of operational missions? Have there been discussions about how you could use what happened in Yellowknife, I believe in 1996, when they embarked the Hugin autonomous underwater vehicle quite successfully for a variety of trials to take an autonomous underwater vehicle in a 20-foot sea container configuration, as well as a heavy work class 4,000 meter, 5,000 meter capable ROV to actually go on down and touch things on the bottom and sample and not just observe, and turn AOPS into world-class deep seabed intervention tools for the Navy in any theater?
Yeah, so that's a great question that I am not entitled to answer in any way, shape, or form. But what I will say is that I know that there are discussions in regards to what we can do with that quarterdeck cargo space and the missions that we can prepare the ships to do. Now that we're taking delivery of them and we're showing that they have the ability to do things such as obviously Arctic deployments with ease and Op Carib, the next step is to start asking those next questions, and I know that those questions are being asked, but I'm not in any way capable of answering those questions.
Simon Witt, Vard Marine. Very pleased to see that it's well received. We were a partner in the design, preliminary and basic design. My question is about design trade-offs. Obviously with these vessels, there's a trade-off between open water speed and seakeeping and performance in ice. And I'm wondering, from an operational point of view, how did that go? Were you missing the speed that other modern offshore patrol vessels might have in open water, or were you missing ice-breaking capacity in ice? What's the trade-off now that the vessel's in service?
Yeah, so I mean, 17 knots is the max speed, and so that is a limitation, but it's not something that really we encountered as something that we thought was getting in the way of mission success at any point. When you talk about the size of the vessel and the hull shape, obviously is dictated by its ice-breaking capability, and then what could have been a downside for that design was augmented by two fin stabilizers that can deploy out of the ship and then back in. And so when we're in open water away from ice, you deploy the fin stabilizers, and it allows for a beautiful, just nice, solid ride that the hull form, which is meant for ice breaking, would normally not allow you to have. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any naval warfare officer that doesn't want to go fast. But I think that the 17 knots is not something that I would characterize as from my experience, as something that's limiting for the class based on the missions we've assigned to it so far.
You seem fairly enthusiastic about this ship. You didn't make any mention of employment of a helicopter during your circumnavigation. Did you have one aboard, and what are the what's the ability of the ship to host a helicopter, especially one that's relatively large like the CH-148?
Yeah, so we did not have an organic helicopter capability with us during this deployment. We just finished the helicopter operating limits trials in June of 2021, and then there is more work once those trials are done in order to get the full flight capability for the class, and that work is underway. But while we were in the Arctic, I mentioned that we had a medical emergency, so we. Our medical team was able to correctly diagnose what was going on. We contacted the Canadian Coast Guard. They got their helicopter in the air, came. We were able to receive it, refuel it, and operate with them, and then get the member ashore by going back to the Coast Guard ship, refueling again, and then going to a community, and then coming down south for medical help. So even if you're not carrying a helicopter, when we look at the Arctic, we got to look at how we as a whole team of the government work. And there are helicopters around, and we were able to call in those when we needed to, even though for this deployment we weren't operating with an organic helicopter. But that capability is something that's super exciting when we do eventually start taking and carrying our own CH-148 helicopter detachment.
Kevin Carley with the Naval Association of Canada. Gosh, I too appreciate your enthusiasm, particularly after lunch. And I'm just wondering where I can join up again. My question is, and perhaps it's a little bit unfair for you, but I know we have some braid in the room. I appreciate the speed time distance associated with the Arctic, but I guess I'm curious, particularly given Canada's hopefully renewed focus on the Asia Pacific, why 4 east and 2 west?
That is a good question, and I mean, I think the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy is better situated to answer that than I.
Yeah, so the breakdown is really quite simple. The Arctic is closer to Halifax if you look at the distance up to Nanisivik, so we want the preponderance of them to be there, but there are clearly missions in the Pacific as well. I don't know that the Max Bernays and Robert Hampton Gray, once they're both based out here, will both go up to the Arctic every year. In fact, I would be surprised if we did that. We'll almost certainly probably send one south, whether it, and perhaps beyond Op Carib. We see a lot of potential, especially after the presentation at lunch, probably the most depressing one of the conference, about fishing. So we think that there is a contribution that can be made. The advantage of the Harry DeWolf class is it's not a warship in the sense of a frigate coming with the 250 people on board and all of that capability. It's crew of 65, the ability to embark stuff and all the right connectors make it perfectly suited to the type of constabulary roles that we see in a lot of the regions in Indo-Pacific, possibly Africa as well. So the plan is to send Harry DeWolf across to Africa this coming summer as part of Op Projection Africa. So we intend to fully explore the capability of this. Perhaps at some point it actually goes down and sees if the ice in Antarctica is the same as the ice in the Arctic. Yeah, no, there've been a number of people keen to see it down your way, so we're excited to show it off and figure out how to best use it. With 6, we don't need to send 6 in the north every year. It's probably 2 is about the right number. And so the rest of them, we think it's a good balance, 4 and 2.
And sir, in a previous...
Sorry, just a second question, if I could. I know you've got tremendous range, but are you capable of underway replenishment?
Yes, we are. The ship is it does have an underway replenishment capability that was proven during the post acceptance trials, and work is underway to further refine that capability and to develop the standard operating procedures for it.
So one of the statistics that often comes up when we're trying to conceptualize the size of the area is the fact that from Esquimalt to the western approaches of the Canadian Arctic is roughly equal to the distance between Esquimalt and Yokohama, Japan. So that's contextualize the size of the area we're talking about, as well as why Halifax over Esquimalt too.
Thanks again. I'll also back up the comments on your enthusiasm. It was great, great presentation. Pete Levy from Australia. 2 dumb Australian questions, both relating to ice, because not something we have to really deal with. First one, you mentioned going through 1 metre ice. what's the limit there and where I'm going with that? Like how much ice could you get through, and where I'm going is what percentage of the year could you do that deployment you just did? And the second one, it relates to your refrigeration repairs. If you're living north of the Arctic Circle, why do you need a freezer in winter?
So I guess I'll start with the refrigeration question. And so their concern was getting their catch to the point when you could just leave something on the ground and it would freeze. When we were there, it was only about 2 degrees above zero, and so it takes them a while as a small community to be able to replenish that. So, but the ship's rated to in excess of 1 meter of first year ice. It's a Polar Class 5 vessel, and so where that comes in is that's the total classification for the ship. But when you break it down into segments, the Polar Class 5 is actually the midships of the ship. The bow and the stern are actually Polar Class 4, which is a higher ice rating. And what we saw when we were doing the transit and during the ice trials the previous February is that the ship has fantastic ice capabilities, and first year ice was no problems. And then a lot of what we saw in the Central Arctic was that multi-year inclusions, you try to avoid that as best as possible as you pick your way through, and we use the drone to help us out with that. But we were also able to handle the multi-year inclusions as well. I can only say great things about the ability to smash through ice with a ship, which is fun. I recommend it to everyone.
If I may, Ryan, could you just take a moment and speak to some of the challenges or just the approaches to the training that were used to bring, operators like yourself up to, to have this knowledge of operating in ice when you weren't born an ice navigator?
No. But I was lucky. It's one of those funny things is early on in my career, all of my friends were going to warm places, and I kept on being put on ships that went to do op Nanook. And so at the time it was all like, oh, I'm sitting on a beach and you're in the Arctic again. But it paid off for me with that experience. And I had the opportunity to go down to Argentina and do the Antarctic ice navigation course in 2012, and then do a cross-pol with the Canadian Coast Guard and do icebreaking operations with them in 2010. And so I was able to kind of by haphazard get these experiences, and now we've institutionalized that kind of training, and so there is a variety of layered Arctic operations courses that are offered. The first one is an online course on our Defense Learning Network that introduces officers of the watch and NCIOPS and the such to concepts such as ice eggs and ice charts and basic concepts of following an ice lead and Arctic weather concepts. And then the in-person course, which is tailored to the COs, XOs, and operations officers and navigators of Arctic offshore patrol ships, which is done in person, and it has an extensive simulator component where we put them through a variety of scenarios, and they have to do a breakout maneuver of a vessel, and it's a really well laid out course. The captain of Harry DeWolf during this deployment, Commander Corey Gleason, is the one that has been teaching that and providing his experience. So it's great.
Good day, Chief Umbach, FMF Cape Breton. Being the first of class, I understand there's a new maintenance model. One, did you have to experience any of that remote repair work while on deployment, and how did that come about? And what was your perspective with that new maintenance model as a first of class ship?
Yeah, so we have an in-service support contract through Thales. And for me, this wasn't really new because I started my career in the Kingston class, which also has an in-service support contract. And so with Harry DeWolf, we're in the process of building that relationship with Thales, and they're working very hard to establish that supply chain. And so an example of this is we came into Esquimalt and did a 3-week rest and maintenance period where they did a short work period of maintenance on the ship. They flew people into Esquimalt and started building industrial relations here in advance of Max Bernays' arrival, and then we're able to fix things. And they've been really responsive to the needs of the ship. So I found it to be a good relationship. And as XO, as the maintenance officer on board the ship, I had a really good working relationship with our TELUS rep.
Well, thank you, Ryan. That was a very candid and presentation, and thank you all for the wide breadth of questions that you all posed here. I think we have to move on to our next panel now. I'll invite Jonathan Berkshire Miller from the Macdonald Laurier Institute to come to the stage, as well as our representatives from the Five Eyes Navies to discuss Five Eyes perspectives on the Indo-Pacific. And can you please join me in thanking Lieutenant Commander Bell for his great presentation this afternoon?